Well, good morning, everybody. It's Friday, and welcome to Penn Vicar. It's nice to see you, and thank you for joining us on our journey through the Gospel of Matthew. Just to remind you, quick notes if I may, it's weekend, lots of services in our churches, both in Tamworth and in Penn, and we'd absolutely love to see you and worship either face-to-face or online. Wherever you're watching, we'd love to see you, and we'd be a better church with you in it, so we'd love to see you. Remind you also, we're not a million miles away from Holy Week now, and Easter and so on. So do get the services in your diary and do join us so you can really appreciate what Jesus did for us and appreciate his resurrection as well. So lots of exciting services going on the next few weeks. Just get them in your diaries and you'd be very, very welcome. As I've already explained, we're on our journey through the Gospel of Matthew and we're now in Matthew chapter 22, starting to read at verse 34. So here goes. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now when the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question. What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he? They said to him, the son of David. He said to them, how is it then that David by the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet? If David thus calls him Lord, how can you be his son? No one was able to give him an answer, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, Jesus has been through quite an interrogation in chapter 22. Firstly, he's had the Pharisees and the Herodians gathering together for the first question. Then he's had the Sadducees, and now the Pharisees got together again. And one of them, some bright spot lawyer, asked Jesus this question. And it's kind of one of these silly questions, really, like how many angels can you put in a pinhead, that kind of silly question. Which of the commandments is the greatest? And I'm sure there was a huge debate amongst rabbis at the time. And again, it's the kind of thing, if Jesus gives the wrong answer, he can't win either way, whatever he says. Because if he says one commandment, then what about the other one, and so on. So Jesus responds by giving them two commandments. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. Notice in both cases, the command is to love. And he basically says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So you can take the whole of the Old Testament, here it is, and by loving God and your neighbour, you can fulfill all that. Do that, love God and love your neighbour, and the rest, you might say, will follow. That's what he's saying, because on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Love your neighbour as yourself, and love God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. So what in practice does that mean? Well, really, he means love God with everything. So love God with your heart. Really love God. I mean, we should have an emotional response to God. We shouldn't just love God with our heads. We should love God. We can love football teams, we can love golf, we can love our families, and I'm sure we can, I know we can love God too. And I think we're kind of commanded as much as we can to do that. There's nothing wrong with having, nothing at all wrong with having an emotional response to God. So love God with your heart. Love God with your soul means everything about you. Just make loving God every fibre of your being. Make it everything about you. Your very self loves God. Love God with your soul means to love God with everything inside you. Then love God with your mind. Believe it or not, God's given us all a brain. Might surprise us sometimes. But that brain cell that we've all been given, in my case, we should love it. We love God with it. So use God. Everything about it. Think your thought patterns. Love God with them. Your skills and talents, love God with them. Whatever you've got in the brain that God's given you, love God with it. So love God with your mind as well. So basically what he's saying is, love God with your heart, with your emotions, love God with your soul, which means everything about you, and love God with your mind too. And use the brain capacity that God's given to love him and to think about him and to study his word and think about ways in which we can be kind and think about God with your brain. So that's the first thing. Then he talks about loving your neighbour as yourself. And basically it means like do to other people as you'd have them do to you, put them in your place, really. Now this is quite interesting because he notice he doesn't say like them. He commands us to love them. Not everybody is likable. We like some people more than others, but we're not called to like everybody. We are called to love them, and I think that's very important. I think it can be challenging sometimes to love people, even though we don't find them particularly easy. Mind you, I think in some ways, actually, some of the people we find difficult can actually be the people who God's gift to us. Because often, if I don't like someone very much, it's because it actually tells me more about me than it does about them. And actually, if I get a reaction against somebody, it can sometimes be because God is teaching me something about myself, because I'm jealous of them or whatever it may be. So actually, watch out when you don't like somebody, because actually it can be God teaching you something. But as I say, we're not called to like everybody. We're called to love them. We're called to love our neighbours as ourselves, which means to treat them as we'd like to be treated, and to give them the dignity that we'd like to be given. And I think it's really important too that I remember someone saying to me in Jamaica a few years ago, a great man shows his greatness by the way he treats the little people. So be kind to everyone, not just the people that can help you in your whatever you want to do. We should love everybody, love the people that we find difficult, and learn from them. Learn also from people, from everybody, whoever they may be. However unimportant they may be in the sight of the world, actually everyone's really important in the eyes of God, and we can learn from them too. So we're to love God with our heart, soul, mind and strength. We're also called to love God with to love our neighbours as ourselves. But as I say, we're not called to like them, we're called to love them. And as I say, some of the people we find difficult can actually be God teaching us lessons, but we're called to love everybody. So after you've done that then, Jesus has been questioned, as I say, by the Pharisees and Herodians. They've had a go. The Sadducees have had a go. Finally, this bright spot lawyer Pharisee has a go too, and they all kind of come nowhere. And then, in quite an interesting way here, the tables get turned, and Jesus asks them a question about the Messiah. And they say, "Whose son is he?" And they say, "David." And then Jesus comes out with this psalm. It's interesting what the New Testament quotes. Psalm 110. It's actually quoted a lot in the New Testament. It's not a particularly well-known psalm, actually, but it gets quoted a lot in the New Testament. And the Pharisees say that the Messiah, when he's to come, is David's son. David's great grandson. And yet Jesus points out that in Psalm 110, which was written by David, he says, "The Lord said to my Lord," the Lord being God, said to my Lord, which is the Messiah, "Sit at my right hand," and so on. And Jesus says, how can David call the Messiah Lord if he's his great to his grandson? Making the point that the Messiah is so much more than just the son of David. That the Messiah is the son of God. That the Messiah is the son of man. That the Messiah is the Messiah, but so much more than that. And to get a hang of that, he's not just an ancestor of David. He's so much more. And Jesus effectively is saying something about himself, that he's so much more than just an ancestor of David, that he's, great high priest, that he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and not just a descendant of David. Otherwise, because if he was just a descendant of David, David wouldn't have called him Lord, would he? That's the point Jesus is making here. So Jesus, having had a real shellacking with these questions in chapter 22, ends by asking them a question which completely flounders them. And then it says at the end of chapter 2, nor from that day did anyone dare ask him any more questions. Jesus is so wise, so clever, and so insightful that they threw everything they could at him intellectually, and you replied and got it right every time. Finally, he asks them a question, and he gets to the point there where they don't ask him anything more. The die is cast. The scene is set. Next step, Holy Week, Good Friday, death on a cross, the resurrection, and the salvation of the world. More over the weekend. God bless you. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll give you another Bible talk on Monday.